Healthcare is one of the largest sectors in the S&P 500, but it has underperformed overall markets this year. As the first quarter earnings season gets underway, we're looking at how to navigate the big picture with the Yahoo Finance Playbook. To discuss the outlook for the industry, we're joined by Meghan Fitzgerald, Grey Ghost Advisors private equity investor, and Brian Tanquilut, Jefferies Healthcare Services equity research analyst. Thank you both so much for being here, Meg. Friend of the show, good to see you as always. And Brian, welcome. Meg, let's start with you because we have indeed seen healthcare underperform. And obviously, healthcare is very complicated. There are a lot of different subsectors right now. There's been a lot of sort of fireworks around what's happening in pharma, in the GLP-1s. What are we going to see earnings-wise? Are we going to see companies deliver on some of that promise?
Yeah, I think we are. I think healthcare, it's material to the Fortune 500. There's still a lot of long and important tailwinds around demographics, innovation. And this tends to be a place that does well during downturns and during elections. So I'm pretty bullish that healthcare will get out of being a laggard and move to the front. I do believe you're going to see strong earnings this week from Lilly and Novo and those that have a GLP portfolio. Quite frankly, I think it's an easy beat. I think the one that everyone's more interested in to see how Pfizer unfolds with the Seagen acquisition and integration, as well as some of their cost-cutting initiatives. Last week, Bristol Myers Squibb said that they were going through a $1.5 billion cost-cutting. So I think many in pharma are getting down to fighting weight, optimizing their portfolios. And quite frankly, they have about $1 trillion worth of dry powder. So I think the meeting at ASCO in 30 days will be very interesting to see if there's some acquisitions.
Brian, same question to you. Talk about healthcare, obviously big sector, lots of verticals and subsectors, but give us your big picture take, Brian. What are you expecting with earnings?
Hey, Josh, thank you. So yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that what we've seen so far is that there is or has been a rise in broader healthcare utilization trends. So kind of taking back to Meghan's comment about demographics being a tailwind, we're starting to see that show up in the earnings results of the managed care companies, the healthcare insurance guys. And that has translated into some underperformance for names like United Health and Elevance and Humana, right, over the last 6 months. Now, the flip side of that, though, is that we are seeing the corresponding strength in volumes from hospitals, labs, imaging companies, and basically all these healthcare providers. So what we're seeing is that, when I look at my coverage universe of healthcare services stocks, we've seen some strength year to date in some of these big names.
Brian, I'm curious if there is any concern, if we're starting to see a little bit of weakness at the edges of consumer spending, if we will see any kind of decrease in elective surgeries or other kinds of procedures, and if that's going to pressure the companies that you cover.
What's interesting, Julie, is we are actually seeing strength in elective procedures, primarily in the Medicare Advantage population or the seniors, right? So if you think about it, government-run insurance for seniors, there's very little out-of-pocket there. So it's not as sensitive to broader economic trends. And because the aging demographic, rather the aging population trend is there now, where if you think about the oldest baby boomer, born in 1946, is now 78 years old, we've seen the senior population get to that point where they're actually using more healthcare, they're getting more sickly. So without a big out-of-pocket component, the macro side of things is not impacting demand and utilization. Now, where we are seeing the impact of macro, though, is on the consumer healthcare side. If you're thinking of the drugstore, right? I mean, when you look at what CVS and Walgreens have said, we are seeing some weakness on the front end of the store as a result of pressures on the consumer. But in the true healthcare utilization environment, like real healthcare services, that has actually been on the uptrend, if not, really been strong the last few months.
Meghan, back over to you. Another big trend we've seen in this space, Meghan, is M&A. I'm just curious whether you expect that to continue, and if so, are there certain sort of verticals or subsectors, Meghan, where you would expect to see that activity be more pronounced?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think a lot of biotech has slowed down because of the rate environment, but big pharma is very active. Last week, there was $1 billion acquisition. I think big pharma will continue to put money to work. And then, of course, there's been a lot of activity in the private sector and on the VC and PE side. Last week, we saw one of the largest biotech startups ever get off the ground, and that was an AI, $1 billion launch of a new company that was going to try to expedite drug development. So I think the private markets will be very active. I think there'll continue to be a lot of companies divesting things in healthcare that are not core assets. And so I think it should be an interesting year. The only caveat is obviously the rate environment makes it a little bit tricky for some that don't have cash and are looking for financing.
And Brian, as I look at the earnings picks that you have, the picks right now, and I see the likes of BrightSpring and Tenet on the list, what sort of distinguishes the stock that you like better right now in an environment that you described as sort of broadly positive?
Yeah, so I see that you just have a graphic on of the picks that we have getting into earnings season. So the broader theme really here is utilization. So Tenet Healthcare runs one of the bigger chains of surgery centers, ambulatory surgery centers across the country. So they're benefiting from elective surgeries, specifically in joint replacement. So senior population is growing and they're getting older, they're getting more joint replacement cases, and doctors would rather do them outpatient than inpatient, moving away from hospitals. So Tenet is a big beneficiary of that. Now, HCA, largest hospital company in the country, has also seen some of that. Behavioral health, Julie, is an area that we are very bullish on. We think that there's a lot of consumer interest in government funding and insurance funding to bolster behavioral health, mental health services and access. So we like Acadia Health for that matter. BrightSpring is actually a play on biotech and specialty drugs. They are one of the largest distributor of specialty pharmaceuticals in the country. So as the pipeline of new drugs comes in, new drug development translates to very good volumes for BrightSpring. And then my last pick there is RadNet. It's a combination of, they're the largest operator of imaging centers in the US, so x-rays, mammograms, ultrasounds. But the flip side of that is they actually are the world's largest imaging company in AI by revenue. So they're benefiting from the use of AI in diagnostic imaging. They have FDA-approved products used here in the US and the UK. So we're very bullish in RadNet here.
Meghan, final question to you. I'm just interested to get your take on this, Meghan. It's kind of an interesting headline. You saw that Oracle, it's moving its headquarters to Nashville, Meghan, to be closer to the healthcare industry. Is that a trend here, Meghan? Is Nashville sort of should we think about it as kind of one of the new epicenters of the healthcare industry?
I think it's been the epicenter for 10 years, and a lot of people are figuring it out. It definitely is a hub of innovation. It's where HCA was born. I had invested a long time ago in a company called Navi Health that was bred right out of there. So very tight alignment between providers and payers and just a smart network of folks. I saw today a chart. Houses are very expensive there. So might be a little late, might have to rent or get a roommate if that's going to be your healthcare place to kind of venture to.
I think Brian's already there. Don't you live in Nashville,
Yeah, I was
Brian?
going to say, Josh, I'm in Nashville, so I've seen it grow. And to Meghan's point, I think innovation in healthcare services is very strong here, but we've seen it expand beyond just healthcare services. So we're seeing healthcare tech. There's some life sciences companies starting to emerge here in Nashville. So it is really becoming the healthcare hub outside of biotech. So we're pretty excited here on the ground for what it does.
Meghan, Brian, it was great to have both of you on the show today. Thanks so much for joining us.